Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock.
And we're here for another show.
Okay.
More stuff to talk about.
If you say so, I guess we're here.
If you've never listened to the show before, first of all, welcome. And
second of all, how could you?
Yeah. Hey, how dare you wait till episode, 27?
You're going to be all fucking lost. Now we got to go all the way back to the beginning. I got to talk about more Japanese monsters and get you caught up.
Begin by doing a quick recap of the last 26 episodes of the show.
Previously on the Non-Essential Podcast. And then it's like, it's just a recap of like a 24 episode.
By the time we'd caught up, we'd be like, well, that's our time for this week.
And we'll be back next week with more topics. Yeah, so if you haven't listened to the show before, every week me and Steve get together, tell each other stories, fact, fiction, history, lore, anything that catches our eye, basically, in the panic attack we have building up to the show every week. Last week, you talked about some failed assassination attempts on good...
No, they were very real assassination attempts. That's last week was the Mormons who murdered an entire group of settlers. The week before was failed assassination attempts on Fidel.
Right, that's right. A lot of death, and I get it confused.
I know, I tend towards the things that make you want to kill someone else or kill yourself or all of the above, like just depressing, horrible people. But I don't have that this week, so good news there.
Well, I have some like that. The reason I got that confused, I was thinking about your topic on the failed assassination attempts on Castro, and that got me thinking about what other kind of historical assassination fuck-ups have there been.
It's an interesting topic.
And it's such a deep well. So I'm going to talk about one of them today. I don't know how common this is. Like, that's the thing when we get into like history topics. Like, I'm such a fucking dipshit, and just like I tuned out like half of all my history classes. That's just like, I don't know how common this is.
You talked about the entirety of the third grade curriculum. Like, oh.
But I would like to think that if my fucking history teachers brought this shit up, I would totally have been interested in it.
And just to interrupt real quick before you start, that I get in the same thing where you're going with that, where it's like you look at something and you're like, I've never heard of this before, and there's always that fear that like everybody else in the world has heard of it before.
Right.
But then I remind myself, if I haven't heard of it, somebody out there hasn't heard of it. So
yeah, and I know that like when this story was going down, people like your teachers and your textbooks were more caught up in like way more important shit. But this is the stuff I wanted to hear about. So Giuseppe Marco Fieschi was born in Murato, which is a commune on the island of Corsica, in 1790. Corsicans were a population, they were kind of like they were under French control around this time. And it was kind of that awkward, like France really wants them under their thumb, but they're still kind of their own culture. So, like, this population was really hung up on ideas of, like, honor, and that was kind of your status. While other places it might be your wealth or whatever, here it was about how honorable of a person you were and your family.
Oh, so I'd be screwed.
Yeah, if you were, like, a criminal or just if people just saw you...
Just a shitty person.
Yeah. Saw you at the absolute bottom of the class barrel, you were probably never going to climb the social ranks. But everyone was always trying to prove their worth by how just, quote, honorable they were. And Fieschi is one of the most interesting, dishonorable people I've ever read about, because he's no exception. Like, you'll find throughout his story, he is hung up on this idea of honor, but very selectively. But, let's start at the beginning. So Fieschi's impoverished family, they didn't own land, but they weren't completely, like, bottom tier. His father did die in a Embrun prison after being sentenced 10 years for theft, but the oldest son of the family, Thomas, died in the Napoleonic Wars, and the youngest son, Antoine, who was born mute, supposedly led a very virtuous and hardworking life.
That's only because he couldn't say what was on his mind.
Yeah, it turns out he has like the most foul thoughts.
Yeah, he was the biggest asshole, but nobody knew.
Yeah, everything he would say was just a death threat. Giuseppe, the middle child, spent his youth as a shepherd and then saw the Napoleonic Wars as an opportunity to raise his own station. Rather than fearful of battle, he seemed more intrigued and gung-ho about it. In 1808, he joined a Corsican regiment that was sent to Naples, then to Russia, and by 1812, he was a sergeant. When his corps was disbanded in 1814, he returned home, but he was kind of military-minded then, so he joined up with a Joachim Murat, who was Napoleon's brother-in-law, in a failed attempt to retake his kingdom of Naples. When the attempt failed, Murat was executed, and Fieschi and the others were kind of lucked out and they were deported to France. Adrift after the wars, he returned home with no possessions or prospects. He stole a mule, but got off when more respectable members of his clan offered to cover for him. But then ended up eating a 10-year prison sentence for stealing a steer. So I love. So
he didn't learn from the.
Like, this guy's backup plan after war was barnyard robbery, and again, honorable is the word I want to keep going back to whenever he pulls shit like this. But I do have to also point out that this is an assassin story. We will get there. It is definitely the high point. So in prison, his hard work and good conduct raised him up to the level of foreman in the prison factory. So it's that weird thing. Like, he's a criminal, but he'll fucking climb the ranks if you give him a job. Like, he's just really back and forth about, like, when he will be honorable to people.
Well, I mean, you're honorable in a society like that. That's what I love about this system, is you can be honorable when it serves you.
Yeah.
And then, like, whatever, when it doesn't, which is exactly what honor is.
Right. This higher status allowed him to meet an inmate from the women's section of the prison, a Lawrence Petit. When he was released, he wasn't allowed to return to Corsica, since he was a former criminal. So instead he went to Lyon, where Petit lived. When Petit was released 3 years later, she went to meet with him, despite the fact that her current husband, Francois Abeau, was still alive. Fieschi would move on to Paris after that, after kind of just being this weird third wheel for a while. And clearly having an affair. But he would move on to Paris, calling himself a political prisoner of the old regime, as opposed to what he actually was, which was a petty cow thief. When Petit's husband would die in 1830, she would go on to follow Fieschi to Paris. And in 1831, her 14-year-old daughter from that first marriage, a woman named Nina, came to live with the two. She had a serious childhood skin disease that had cost her 3 fingers on her right hand and an eye. And I guess at some point, Fieschi decided starting an affair with Nina would be a good idea. So he had this affair for basically the entirety of his marriage, and they had a relationship apparently to the end of his life.
So true love.
Yeah, but there was a long time where he was just doing it behind Petit's back. Eventually around 1834, Fieschi would just be really overt about his affair and very matter of fact when asked about it. Despite the fact that, I mean, you look back at any history story like this and you're like, oh, it was a different time. It wasn't that different. Everybody thought Fieschi was fucking weird and creepy, and it was disgusting and wrong. Not too different from how we would look at it now, just not much you could think to do about it. Then again, what did we do about Woody Allen? Surprisingly, this took a heavy strain that began to unravel his relationship with Petit. It's worth noting, though, that before then, Fieschi was kind of bouncing around as far as work went. By calling himself a political prisoner, it allowed him a few loopholes for a little bit of, good old-fashioned fraud, honorable fraud, and getting mad when people would offer him a job instead of just giving him money straight up, citing how fatigued the Russian campaign had made him, which was fucking years and years ago at this point.
Right. But I really like that technique, though. I mean, that's when I personally, I'd be like, look, I'd love to come into work today, but last weekend, 2 weekends ago, I did like 6 loads of laundry. So, you know.
I did all the dishes. You can't ask me to go to work right now. I'm winded. So yeah, he was kind of bouncing around, but at the beginning of 1834, a friend gave him a top position on a resurfacing project, which supposedly gave him responsibility of managing a dozen men and handling a considerable amount of the money tied up into the project. Things should have been looking up for him if he hadn't been so proud of the fact he was fucking his stepdaughter. So, 1834 is the key year here for where everything falls apart for Fieschi. Lawrence Petit leaves him that summer. Neighbors would say, building up to that, they would hear screams and gunshots from their house.
Huh. That's usually not a sign of a healthy, happy marriage.
It's also usually not something that just you don't hear gunshots and then keep hearing gunshots and screaming. Usually
that's true too.
It resolves shit, just not in a good way. And everybody around him, all his neighbors, knew what the fuck he was doing with his stepdaughter. It didn't bring Fieschi a lot of honor, despite him eventually thinking oh, this makes me look bad. So he tried to cover up for it and say that Nina was adopted, even though she wasn't.
So yeah, I like that. It's like, well, okay, so the having an affair with your own stepdaughter, that's the part that's gone too far. So if I just say she's my adopted daughter, then everybody will be cool with it.
Right. So yeah, he's just a piece of shit, but he's a really interesting one. It seemed to be one of those messy breakups, with Petit later saying she was inconsolable to have shared her bed with such a monster. You have to imagine, it's a messy fucking split when that's what triggers it. There's no there's no amicable splitting of assets when you discover that your guy's been doing that shit.
Well, that begs the question, did the daughter stay or go?
Well, I don't dwell too much on Nina on this, because she's just really a fucking victim in all this, honestly. But she, like I said, throughout Fieschi's life, basically, she's tied up off and on with him, and constantly trying to, constantly being promised, always having a carrot dangled in front of her that this, and then we'll get our own place and blah blah blah. But really,
I'm sorry, that was a bad choice of phrase there for the subject. Or at least it was, if your mind's as fucked up as mine.
I guess so. But he's always promising her the world, and but never actually, he's in no position to get it, and he wouldn't probably do it even if he could. Meanwhile, he was pissed that his wife Lawrence basically took all of their stuff and left him on the streets. But you would think, this sick fuck had a good job now. Certainly he would bounce back. Unfortunately, that October, Fieschi lost his supervisor job when his boss found out he had been gambling with the payroll.
Oh, yeah, that's not good.
Fieschi reportedly told him, "I've lost all honor with you. You won't see me again." And he left.
I hope that's true.
That is a quote from the supervisor.
Sweet. So it's not you won't see me again because you fired me because I took all your money. It's, I've lost my honor. My honor tank is empty. Good day, sir. I'm leaving on my terms.
He has the most fucked up idea of honor ever. He doesn't think about the gambling, the payroll thing. Just when he gets caught, well, looks like I failed you. Goodbye.
Yeah, so the getting caught is the dishonorable part, not the act.
And it's one of those reactions to getting busted where it's I have to imagine the guy's all your anger just goes away and is replaced with bafflement. That just wait, you're just leaving? You're not even going to try to defend yourself? Also, all of his various frauds from his lie of being a political prisoner started to catch up with him as well, and The local authorities were wondering, how the fuck were you actually a political prisoner? It says here you stole a fucking cow. And before
I've lost honor with you too, sir.
I will be on my way. I wish that was an option in like Red Dead Redemption. Just when the police want to stop you, like, I'm sorry, goodbye.
Real life, I would love it. You get pulled over for speeding, and the officer, do you know why I pulled you over? Because I have lost all my honor with you. You will not see me again. Good day. And
I suppose you're right, officer. Speeding is dangerous. Goodbye. And you get out of your car and walk away.
I have totally learned my lesson.
So yeah, with all this, he was pretty much penniless. And he ran into an old neighbor of his, Pierre Maury, who took Fieschi in and gave him money to survive, basically.
That's interesting, given that you said that his neighbors were the ones that were constantly like...
This was a previous neighbor from like an apartment or something, but...
I was going to say, I can imagine how awkward that would be, like, oh, hey, Jim. It's like, oh, hey.
Well, if you know anything...
how's the shooting going? Gotten any better at it?
Well, if you know anything about Pierre Maury, even if he was one of his neighbors around this time, he wouldn't care. After a few months, Fieschi was deeply in debt, and most of that debt was to Maury. But Maury didn't want money. Maury was something of a revolutionary zealot, and he had one goal in mind, killing King Louis Philippe. And damn it, Fieschi was going to be the one to help him do it. So one day, Fieschi himself had a real fucking bad idea, saying, if you were in a fortress with 300 men, and an epidemic carried off half of them, could you not defend yourself with just a few people? I then had the idea to make this machine that would employ 90 muskets lined up in rows. I explained the machine to Maury, and he said that could be used for Louis Philippe. Let's remember, at this point, no point in this fucking biography of this dude is Fieschi any sort of engineer.
No, I'm picturing Mo Sizlak from the NRA, the gun episode of The Simpsons. If people are familiar with it, he shows up to the NRA. It's not NRA, but that's who they're poking fun at. And he's like, and it just shows him, and he goes, that's how you turn 5 separate guns into one super gun. And they're all just like tied together.
Yeah, it is just as random as if me saying, like, what if there was a sword that was actually like 6 swords? Like, and then I actually tried to make the shit and like cut my own head off somehow. At this point, they brought in a third conspirator, a Theodore Pepin, and began their planning. Morin and Pepin would basically be the wallets for the project, while Fieschi would rent a 4-room apartment and build the damn thing.
So 90 muskets, you said?
Well, his idea was 90 muskets. I don't believe it was 90. I wrote it down here. It looks like it would end up being a 25-barrel gun.
Wow.
It's still
I'm picturing like how you sneak that into anywhere. Be like,
the nickname of this gun is called the Infernal Machine. So it's still a fuck you monstrosity.
Yeah.
But he rented this apartment because it gave them a clear shot at the king. Obviously, you're building something this fucked up and big and heavy. You're not going to be able to move it. So they're trying to build it on the spot that it would give him a shot at the king when him and his entourage would do their annual review of the National Guard that July. And
I assume the National Guard fails if the king gets murdered in front of them.
You would think. This is probably going to be the ultimate test of the National Guard. So as the king and his entourage reached the Boulevard du Temple, the Fieschi fired his infernal machine. They say a terrible explosion that sounded like ragged platoon fire just erupted, and men and horses began to fall. Heroes from the Napoleonic War who were with the king and the entourage were killed, and the crowd quickly panicked. The king and his sons galloped across the horrific scene as Louis Philippe realized he had been hit just hard enough to cause a serious bruise on the side of his head.
Take that.
Regardless,
your portrait is ruined, sir.
Regardless, they continued their route and reviewed the National Guards for 2 hours. So
that's dedication. But Now, I love the compare and contrast there, where Pierre is like, oh, so I fought in a war like 20 years ago. I am too famished. Famished is the wrong word, whatever, to work. And then the king's like, I just got shot in the head, but it didn't kill me, so I'm going to keep doing my job.
Yeah, he's like, ow, that hurt. He went on and continued his fucking review, even though 18 had died from this just eruption of fire, and 22 were seriously wounded. People quickly noticed thick black smoke poured out the window of the apartment.
Yeah.
And as guards broke into it, they saw a mostly empty apartment with an active fire in the fireplace, the 25-barrel gun anchored to a wooden frame, and bloody handprints and projectile marks on the walls, as if the machine just fucking blew bullets everywhere, both in the room and out the window. There was also a pool of blood on the floor and a blood-stained rope nailed to the sill. Fieschi had swung onto a jutting roof next door, and after climbing through the kitchen window of another apartment and trying to make his way down, he was quickly arrested on the stairs. So when he fired the thing, the machine blew apart his face.
Cool.
It tore the skin and muscles from his jaw and badly fractured his skull. He would also end up losing 2 fingers from the incident. But despite all of his pretty grave injuries, they started interrogation immediately. Despite frequent interruptions when he would grow faint, likely from just having blown himself to miserable shit.
Yeah, shock and blood loss. That'll do it.
Right. For a while, he was putting up a front that he was somebody called Joseph Girard, but eventually he became very depressed, as I imagine when you realize you're completely fucked.
Yeah, I mean, because at that point they're going to execute Joseph or Pierre. Like, it doesn't matter what you call yourself.
Right,
like,
you're screwed.
You're caught. You're right.
Maybe it's that honor taking hold. Experiencing what they called a great moral weakening, he began sobbing and admitting he was actually Fieschi. Fieschi began telling everything, maybe out of some true guilt, definitely out of some enjoyment for his newfound attention, and certainly some out of his dislike for his co-conspirator, Theodore Pepin, who he had butted heads with a lot over finances during the whole planning and building of the attack.
If he'd given me more money, my gun would have worked.
Right, it wouldn't have fucking blown my face off. Meanwhile, Maury was just an old, violent, insane bastard and didn't really care beyond just wanting to get the job done. So, Fieschi, by being completely honest with everyone, Fieschi definitely thought he would probably get off and get the ultimate pardon, if he reveals everybody who was involved. But that did not happen. No.
It's very difficult to get pardoned from attempting to kill a king or a president or something like that.
And then hitting almost 20 people who you actually did murder.
Right. But in fairness, I wasn't trying to murder them.
Right. He was condemned to death by guillotine along with his co-conspirators. Pepin went first, and then Maury, and then Fieschi last. His final words were, "I'm going to appear before God. I have spoken the truth. I die content. I have rendered a service to my country in signaling my accomplices. I regret my victims more than my life." Again, just that super weird sense of honor.
Yeah, that's what it's about to say. It's my honor has finally been restored.
You don't feel you don't stop dishonorable things. You just feel real bad after you've done them. But at no point is he actually a good person, but he's just so hung up on honor even to the end. So, it's worth noting that within this year in France, no fewer than 7 other plots against Louis Philippe were exposed. So there were actually a decent chunk of Fieschi apologists, basically in the culture at that time. But he was just a fucking dipshit and a bad person in pretty much every way. It's worth noting the victims were interred at the vaults of Les Invalides, which is usually reserved for military leaders that France wishes to honor. Meanwhile, Fieschi's head was given to a doctor for study purposes, which is exactly right.
Figure this thing out.
Can you find some honor in there? Yeah, so that's the story of Giuseppe Fieschi. Just the idea of a guy like rigging together some bullshit 25 barrel gun and then like blowing himself up, and yeah, it's terrible that he killed other people, but it's such a clusterfuck.
Yeah. And in fact, it's such a stupid plan that I'm kind of surprised that the CIA didn't use that to try to kill Castro. Again, that's 2 episodes back.
That would mean trying to that would mean actually using a type of gun to kill Castro. Yeah. What they would have done was rig together like 30 slingshots.
But it goes exactly back to what we talked about in that episode, where it's like, okay, we could get one super accurate gun and just snipe them, or we could glue together like 20, 30, maybe 90 guns, however many guns we can get. Let's just bolt them together, and that'll do it. It's like,
right.
At that point, why not just move a cannon up into the window?
Yeah, it was basically what he did, and that probably would have been safer.
And I like the thought that he was like trying to flee. So that tells you that at some point in this planning, they thought not only would this work, but that he could get off. Like they wouldn't.
Yeah. Well, I would have gotten away with it if I had all the fingers on my hand. And...
I did want to give him a little bit of credit for being able to like go out the window and swing on a rope over to another roof, like while missing half of his face and his fingers.
Yeah, that's really,
pretty badass. Yeah.
You know, a hardy man for sure, but not a bright one or an honorable one.
The ironic part is once he blew his fingers off, he'd finally like really fit in with his mistress, who you said was missing like 2 or 3 fingers. They would have had something like to really finally specially bond over, other than the whole stepdad or stepdaughter thing.
During the whole building of the gun and stuff, like Nina would visit him at this apartment and shit and all that stuff. And eventually, you know, when the whole plot blew up, literally blew up, I guess authorities talked to her and shit, and it was kind of that, like, that's what I mean. Like, she's kind of a tragic victim in this, is because she's, like, actually convinced that, like, she's in love with this dude and stuff. And, like, at that, as soon as the affair was revealed, she has no contact with her mom anymore. Her dad's dead. The whole time the, like, authorities are talking to her, like, she's just, like, terrified that, like, she's completely screwed. You know, like, she's plotting suicides and like writing suicide letters and shit, and if there's any really sympathetic character in this, it's her to me. But
how much honor did she have?
That's a good question. Well, fucking Fieschi's idea of honor is probably really gross.
I hope that Fieschi has a tombstone somewhere that like gives a point value. Like he died with 1,793 points. I would be negatives because he killed 20 random people, but
I hope the doctors still have his brain, personally. Like, they're not even studying it anymore. They just play catch while they're, like, talking about other shit.
The U.S. military has acquired it. They're trying to study it to figure out how to build a 25 barrel.
How did he do this? Some wacky Frenchman just built the perfect Castro assassination device.
Good story. And it gave me a great chance to, for some reason, use like a really poor Southern gentleman accent in place of like a Frenchman accent. So that was fun.
This was a good time this week. See you later. Yeah. So that's what I got.
Well, like I said, my story, we do good at like meshing these up. I actually got away from the killing and shitty people and found somebody that's just interesting. And he is pretty well known, so this isn't going to be like big secret, like dark thing that I'm exposing, but it's a cool story. So Barry Bremen was born in Detroit, Michigan on June 30th, 1947. He was a lanky but athletic kid, and he grew into like a lanky, fairly athletic man. As an adult,
that's got to be rough.
Yeah,
I'm sorry for him.
But at the time, that was kind of like the fact, like he had like an athlete's build, but it was just that like 1970s NBA player build, where not what we picture today when we picture athletes. As an adult, he sold insurance and novelty toys and goods. And he also worked in marketing. He was very good at his job due to his likable nature and ability to make others feel like at ease, and he was just a likable person. He's a people person. That would be a trait that would also allow him to exceed at his rather peculiar hobby, impersonating professional athletes, in order to participate in some of the world's biggest events. While Barry himself, like I said, was relatively athletic, he played touch football and pickup basketball and softball, that kind of thing. He longed to be in the spotlight. According to a 1980 interview with his wife, Margot, Barry's stunts were part of this like grand fantasy of just like, not even, just being somebody that everybody admires, shows up to watch play, sports or whatever. So Barry's exploits started, at least publicly, in 1979, when he was kind of dared to do this stunt. During the 1979 NBA All-Star Game, he put on a stolen uniform and began taking warm-up shots. It didn't take long for officials to figure out that he was not a NBA player.
I thought you were going to say that they didn't take him long to recognize he's really good.
Good, yeah. Sign that kid up. No, they figured out that he wasn't supposed to be there, and he was ejected and arrested and all that fun stuff. But that was an outcome that he knew would happen. He did it anyway. A few months later, he enlisted the help of his friend and broadcaster Dick Shop. I think it's Shop.
I like Dick Shop. So
yeah, Dick Shop. He also sells novelty toys, just different kinds.
Those are those are a very particular ad on very particular websites.
Yeah, great. Now Facebook's gonna like serve me some really
DickShop.com.
And all-star George Brett, and he used a counterfeit New York Yankees uniform to gain access to the MLB All-Star Game that was being held in Seattle. During warm-ups, Barry shagged fly balls in the outfield for a half hour, and then attempted to pose for a group photo with the likes of Gaylord Perry, Dave Winfield, Nolan Ryan, and Tommy Lasorda, and of course George Brett, who was kind of in on it because he knew Barry.
Yeah, that seems like a George Brett thing for sure.
Yes. It was about the point he tried to get in the photo that his cover was blown and he was escorted off the field. Although, again, with the help of Brett, they attempted to hide him in the clubhouse in the Mariners whirlpool like the thing that the athletes sit in afterwards.
For people who aren't baseball fans, George Brett is one of the biggest fucking characters in like baseball history. Like there's a video online that everyone should watch where he's just telling a story about shitting his pants.
So yeah, that's why the two hit it. Well, like I said, Barry was very likable and he hit it off with about everybody. So he hung out in the whirlpool bath for a while before the Mariners, like one of their trainers, Gary Nicholson, came in there and was like, who the fuck is this guy? And they finally had him like arrested and escorted off the premises. That same year, the PGA US Open, the golf for those not familiar, was being held in Toledo, Ohio. Barry managed to sneak in and play an entire practice round with golfers Wayne Levy and Jerry Pate. So not only did he get into the practice round and pose as a golfer, but he played an entire practice round with these other professional golfers.
Nice. Free golf.
My favorite Barry Bremen stunt, and there's a lot of them, would occur in that later that same year. It was in about December. In preparation for this one, Barry lost 23 pounds. He also shaved his legs and had his wife help him practice drag routines, which he'd then use in conjunction with a custom-made replica cheerleader uniform that he would put on in order to get access to the field of a Dallas Cowboys game. He reportedly spent about $1,200 of his own money in order to pull this off, which I assume included like the costume and probably the dieting, but also like access. I'm sure he bought some kind of like VIP ticket to get down to the sidelines in the first place.
That is also the most fucking crazy shit because of all the disguises. Like a football uniform is like with the helmet. That's
perfect,
the best
right.
disguise. And you went for cheerleader.
He's afraid they'd actually put him in on a play and he'd get killed. So he went cheerleader. He was actually able to get on the field and participate in a single cheer. And I don't mean like a cheer routine. Like he basically said, "Go Cowboys," Before he was almost tackled and arrested, he was
That's
removed from the
usually my
property.
reaction if someone says "Go Cowboys." So.
The best part is I was reading this and I'm thinking, reading about the dieting and like actually practicing with his wife, like drag routines to try to like mimic, feminine movements. And he had this big wig and an authentic, and the Cowboys cheerleaders uniforms, the little like short shorts and the like belly shirts and all that. And then I read this and I'm thinking, man, he must have gone all out and he really like fit in. But there's video of this and he in no way, shape or form looks like anything other than a man in a wig wearing a cheerleader outfit. But what he did is he had it on underneath some regular clothes and he managed to get down on the sidelines and then he like stripped down right there, which is probably his undoing because everybody sees what you're doing. And then he runs over to the cheerleaders. But so he didn't get real far, but I just love that. Like you said, it's a football game and he goes cheerleader. For this, Barry was charged with trespassing and creating a nuisance. And the Cowboys actually filed a $5,000 lawsuit against him, although they later dropped it.
Oh, really? How good of them?
Yeah. And this whole time, like I say, every time he does one of these and gets caught, he gets arrested and there's always fines involved. But it says they usually were in the like $100 to $500 range. And it was something that he knew going in. It was just it's like a streaker. Streakers never ever think they're going to actually get away with it. They just do it for the thrill of doing it.
They do it because they believe in something. All right.
Right.
Which is to have like Joe Buck being like, this is disgraceful to the game.
Well, in 1980, that's the next year, again at the MLB World Series game, Barry dressed as an umpire this time, and he actually walked out to home plate before one of the games with the actual 6-man officiating crew before being discovered and removed from the field. So I love that.
That's pretty good. And I bet he could call a better game.
Probably. But what I really like about that is anybody that follows the sport of baseball, knows the sport of baseball, for better or worse, and in my opinion, and in most people's opinion, worse, officiating in baseball is just like, old boy, they all know each other, and they've all been around forever. So while the crowd probably won't catch on if some random guy walks out in a officiating outfit, the other officials certainly will. But and that's what happened. But it was just funny because he's the kind of guy that would just walk out there and be like, hey, yeah, I'm here part of the crew. Just kidding. And, just put his wrists out and be like, here's the handcuffs.
Hello, I'm the umpire. How do you do? All right, guys, let's call it a good game.
That same year, Barry also returned to the U.S. Open and managed to play another practice round, although this time his performance was so poor that at least one spectator sought out an actual PGA official and asked how this guy ever managed to qualify for the event in the first place.
I was going to say, like, somebody gave him a contract.
The next year, 1981, Barry managed to make it on the field of the Super Bowl, this time by posing as a line judge referee, if you're not familiar. I also found video of this, and it was fucking hilarious because it was similar type deal to the baseball thing but it was prior to the game, but all the teams are out on the field warming up and everybody's on the sideline and the crowd's all in the stadium because it's just before the game. But, the officials always come out and they kind of confer amongst each other, talk to each other. And he walks out and joins the huddle and there's audio of it. And he's just like, hey, I'm here. I'm the line judge. He's like, well, I'm not really a line judge, but I really know he's like, I've been studying the rule book pretty well. And I think I got it down. That's literally what he said.
Fuck it. Roll with it.
Well, you got to imagine these other people, you're not expecting this. So if you're the actual official and some guy comes out and he's dressed as an official, and at first you're going to catch him out of the corner of your eye and think he's one of the officials. And then you get to looking close and then he flat out says, oh, I'm not one of the officials, but I've been studying the rule book and I think I got it down. There's going to be that moment where you're just like staring at him like, what the fuck is going on? And then generally that was followed by people screaming for security and him getting hauled off the field. He did try to get on into the Super Bowl again the following year. This time he tried to get in by dressing up as the San Diego Chicken mascot. It didn't work. He wasn't even allowed into the stadium.
They didn't even know it was him. They just know the fucking San Diego Chicken cannot come in here. Absolutely not.
Well, I wrote that. It proves an important point for the kiddos out there listening that want to, copy this. It's that even though the chicken disguise would have been much better at hiding his identity, something that big and ridiculous that actually masks the wearer's face only draws attention. You're much better off being subtle and like wearing something like a referee outfit or a security guard outfit, something like that. So
these are the things that playing a lot of Hitman will teach you.
That's what was hilarious. I didn't even realize it until about 3/4 of the way through my notes, and then I'm like, oh my god, this is Hitman again.
Yeah, you're obsessed with like what you can get away with in a fucking bird costume.
And I said, like I said, so if you want to mimic his antics, that's, don't go for the big like costume, go for something a little more down to earth. But not that he would want you to try to mimic his antics. In all of his interviews, he'd point out that it was stupid, illegal, and a dangerous thing to do. But also, there was a part of him, and he'd flat out say this, that this was his thing. Basically, like, I came up with this, get your own thing.
This is a dumb thing. Like,
it really...
Like, I wouldn't be proud of this thing.
In 1985, so about 6 years after he started, he would pull off two of his most notable impersonations, including his by far his most public stunt. He managed to buy a ticket for a seat near the front of the stage at the 1985 Emmy Awards in Pasadena. That year, Hill Street Blues' Betty Thomas would win the award for television's Best Supporting Actress. But when her name was called, it was Barry that jumped up and ran up to the stage. He whispered into the stunned and confused presenter's ear that he would be accepting the award for Miss Thomas, who wasn't at the show. And you can see, I mean, this was a very, obviously it's the Emmys. It was all televised. You can find it. His acceptance speech was very short. It was very awkward. It was something like, I'd like to thank everyone that, is here and that couldn't make it. And then also my friend.
Thank everyone she would thank.
Right. And then he ended with, and also my friend Dick Shop. So Shap or whatever it is, but I like Dick Shop too. And about at that point, a lot of people kind of figured out who, because by now he's becoming fairly well known.
Yeah, big fucking pain in the ass.
Yeah, right.
That's infecting every form of entertainment.
Unfortunately for Barry, Betty Thomas actually was at the show. In fact, she had made it almost to the stage by the time he had got up to the podium and started accepting the award.
And she killed him. Right then and there.
Well, that's what later, when she was describing the event, I'm assuming in an interview or whatever, she said it was the nightmare that they're all afraid of. Because when you're a celebrity at an event like that and some random guy runs up on stage and says you're not there and you're accepting the award for her, you're thinking that it's like a crazed fan, and you're at least understandably worried about the giant security threat, But he was arrested and fined $175. For his part, he reportedly apologized to Betty and explained that he honestly really did think she wasn't there. It was not his intention to steal her spotlight and ruin her acceptance speech. He was specifically waiting for somebody to win that wasn't at the show, and he just got it wrong.
I think that's bullshit. I don't think he cared.
If you go back and watch the interviews with him and talk to people that knew him, and really it's how he got away. Like I say, he got arrested every time, but he obviously was getting off pretty light, and it's because people liked him. He was a genuinely nice guy and a likable guy, but he just loved pretending to be part of these giant events.
He liked fucking with shit. He could not
right.
just mind his own goddamn business.
So he really did feel bad about it, and that was probably one of his least favorite moments.
This is a really fascinating, annoying as fuck dude, for sure.
Well, later that same year, he, like I said, his other probably most notable impersonation, they called it, but it's really just a stunt, prank, whatever. And that one, if the Emmys were the one that he probably regretted the most, this was the one that he loved the most. While scouting the Oakland Country Club ahead of that year's U.S. Open, Barry was introduced to a young Fred Couples. And I'm not the biggest golf person, but when you talk about Brett and baseball, Fred seems to be a decent equivalent of that for golf.
He shit his pants too?
Yes, and he talks about it all the time.
Great.
The two hit it off, but by now Barry was too well known in the sports world to simply like tee off with somebody. So instead he told Couples that like, go ahead on your practice round. I'll meet up with you out there. Barry had a friend who was a member at the club who was able to use that membership to smuggle in Barry's clubs and his caddy, whoever that was. So Fred Couples tees off and he plays the first hole, and then he gets to the second hole. And as Fred's getting ready to tee off with his partner there, Barry just comes walking out of the bushes with his golf bag and caddy, and they just join him. He was
just
wearing
like popping out like a fucking Mario Goomba, like, hey.
Yeah, sorry, I had to take that piss after the first hole, but I'm back. He was wearing a large wig and big visor to kind of like hide who he was. His tee shot buzzed the crowd, and after just like 2 or 3 holes, people began openly asking who the hell he was, but nobody came out to remove him from the course. Barry got a little bit nervous when on the 10th hole, they were joined by 2 more pros, Curtis Strange and Bob Eastwood.
Both wielding revolvers.
Well, including the other professional golfer, Jay Haas, who had originally teed off with Couples. That turned it into a 5-some. For those not familiar with golf, that's highly unusual. Tend to be 3-somes or 4-somes, so you don't tend to go much higher than that.
Unless you're, you have the courage in your heart to do so.
Barry was sure he was going to get like caught and taken off the course at that point, but the other golfers seemed to not mind, and they told him, they literally just said, hey, if you can keep your ball in play, you can stay and golf with us. So according to Barry, he shot a 77, which he was very proud of. And again, if you're not familiar with golf, that's pretty fucking good on any course for an amateur.
Considering I've never broken 100 in my life,
right.
77's pretty damn good, yeah.
And that's on a regular course. He's playing on a professional, the U.S. Open course.
Right, I'm playing on like fucking happy fun time putt courses, and I can't get the ball in the hole.
Right. So 77 is pretty good, although I can't help but think back to, he skipped the first hole. He joined on the second. So, like, did he go around and play that first hole, or is that 77, like, short a hole?
Okay, it's 105, all right? Fuck you.
So Barry always said that he liked his golf stunts the best because they lasted the longest. While he was relatively quickly discovered and removed from the other sporting events, he had been able to play entire rounds with the golfing world's elite athletes. In 1986, Barry once again managed to make it on the field for a Major League Baseball All-Star game. This time he was wearing a fake Mets uniform.
I don't like the All-Star game is such boring bullshit. Like, fucking let him wreck the MLB All-Star game. Who cares?
But it's genius because if you're gonna like, if I tried to just I love the Indians, I'm gonna walk onto the field during an Indians game. That's a single team that always play with each other. A player's going to instantly recognize that I am not his teammate because they've never fucking seen. Well, also I'm 5'6" and fat, so
they're gonna say you should be pitching.
But All-Star Game's perfect because you walk out there and somebody be like, I don't recognize that guy, but he's on a different team. Maybe I just haven't met him. And again, in the 80s, it wasn't like today with the internet and all that. But unfortunately for Barry, this time when he went out and began shaking balls during warm-ups, he was almost immediately discovered by the game's acting National League coach, Tommy Lasorda. Which is great because if you know anything about Tommy Lasorda, you can probably imagine how this went, and they also have this on video. But he was out there in the outfield for minutes before Lasorda came charging onto the field screaming, hey, hey, followed by a long expletive-filled scolding. Just the whole time you can see him walking off, and they have the audio of that too, and it's Lasorda going what the fuck do you think you're doing? Who the fuck do you think you are? Get the fuck off the field. And the whole time Barry's just I'm sorry, you got me, I'm sorry.
How fucking funny would it be though if this actually got to him though and made him cry?
Stop yelling at me.
I'm just being dumb, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm imagining Lasorda figured it out because Lasorda was in the picture the first time this guy crashed the All-Star game, so he'd seen him before. But for his part, Lasorda in an interview said he figured something was up when he saw him shagging balls and he couldn't move to his right. Basically,
Aha.
it was immediately obvious he was not an outfielder. But so again, Barry was jailed for this stunt, an outcome he totally expected. But this time, his treatment in jail was so poor that Barry ended up saying that it would be the last stunt he'd ever pull. And a lot of things say it was. I did find some confusing references in some of the interviews to him crashing the PGA Senior Tour, which sounds like it would have happened after this. So maybe he did one more, but this was pretty much the end of his career.
Just one more hurrah with the old folks.
Well, he had prior to that, he had said that was one of the things, because this had been going on for about 7 years, and sports terms, that's forever. You're starting to get to an age where nobody's ever going to believe that you're a professional athlete. Although he probably could have stuck with the referee thing. I don't think he liked that as much.
This isn't a thing. Like, there's no thing here. Like, there's no goal except to, like, eventually get arrested and pay a fine. Like,
and when I say that he was generally quickly figured out, I mean within, like, a minute or two. Not
right. Like, there's the most this guy gets out of this is, like, the commentator goes like, well, that's weird. Moving on.
For him, for his part in all this, he, at the time, became kind of a sensation. In fact, he was pretty famous. Well, it helped that he was friends with that shop guy. Who was a sports commentator for the Today Show, and he'd bring, in fact, twice.
Wait, what shop guy?
Dick Shop, yes.
Thank you. All right. Should put some respect on his name, please.
Well, he got tired of the jokes, so he changed his name to Penis Consortum or whatever.
The Penis Bazaar.
But he twice had given Barry the Athlete of the Week award, like on TV. Barry was asked on to like the Letterman show and the Johnny Carson show. There are countless interviews in magazines and newspapers. So he got his own little, 15 minutes of fame from this.
Fucking shit that captures people's imagination. It's like, I mean, I guess back then, like nowadays, if he did shit like that, he would just do that for like a year and then start a fucking podcast. And
he'd be a hit on YouTube.
Yeah, with a certain crowd, I'm sure.
So his last stunt that I could find was in 1986. In 2015, so almost 20 years after that, he officially announced that he has retired from whatever they call it, impersonation.
From fucking nothing? From doing nothing?
Which it also seems funny to officially announce that you're retired from that 20 years after the last time you did it. It's like, yeah, we've figured that out. And he did point out part of that is with the invention of the taser, and in a post-September 11th, 2001 world, it just was really became a very bad idea to try to crash a field at a sporting event.
Well,
although people still do it, but...
Man, Barry, you might be an annoying fuck, but you're not an idiot.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. Like, at the end of the day, there was a difference between, like, Barry being like kind of cheeky and stupid and like the drunk asshole at a baseball game that just like decides he's going to run onto the field. Like, and people at the time
like the one who's going to like, try to attack a player or like knock a hat off or some shit. Like,
or even interrupt during play. Like all of Barry's antics always happened during warm up. He never tried to like fuck with an event.
Right.
He wasn't trying to mess with it. He was doing it 100% for himself and for entertainment. And people, at least at the time, I think recognized that. And most people liked it and enjoyed it. The people working these events hated it, but...
like, maybe I'm being a little too harsh on him because I don't see the motivation to, but maybe there was something to the idea around that time of, like, if you're a sports fan or something, at any point, this fucker could show up and just do something really weird. Like, that might be actually pretty interesting. Like, and especially, if your team's having a shitty season, That might be all you have to look forward to is like.
And again, he's not going to be an asshole and try to punch a player or do something that like you have to cover your child's eyes. He's not stripping down and like taking a piss on the home base or something like that.
If anything, you get to watch your mascot beat the shit out of him. And...
Right. So in 2011, on June 30th, actually, on his birthday, 2011, he passed away from a battle with esophageal cancer. So that kind of sucked. He was only 64. But 2 years after his death, they would actually run a 10-minute documentary on ESPN's 30 for 30 series called The Great Impostor. So they featured him on one of their shows. And again, if you're not familiar with sports, 30 for 30 it's an award-winning sports documentary series. I don't particularly watch it, but it is very good.
There are some really good episodes of it. I can't say I consistently watch it, but just stuff that interests me. I would love it if they tried to do when they did an episode on him, they kept interrupting it with very, like different shit.
The host keeps like getting revealed to be a fake.
Right.
Like the real host shows up like, who the hell are you?
God, that would have been what a missed opportunity. I should be directing these fucking documentaries.
So, but in fact, his specific 10-minute documentary was credited largely as a large part for that 30 for 30 series winning the early awards that it won. Not saying it's because of that one episode altogether and the others sucked, but that's one of the ones that was cited as why that series is so good. So if you're interested in sports at all, and you haven't checked out 30 for 30, it is a very good series. And sometimes they're serious. This one would not be a serious documentary, but it is pretty cool. Like I said, you can go to YouTube and just look for Barry Bremen. And there's all sorts of like news outtakes from the time. There's
these clips of him. Like a pickup game of catch in your backyard, and he'll show up. Apparently,
show up. Be like, wait a minute, you're not my dad. And he's like, you got me.
But seriously, where is he? Where's Dad?
I would be a little concerned if he showed up though, because like I said, he died about 7 years ago. So, although it'd be kind of cool to be haunted by just a like imposter ghost.
Yeah, that would be great. Like, what?
I'm the boogeyman. I'm here to kill you. Just kidding. I'm Barry Bremen.
Wouldn't it be great if there was a ghost who could pretend to be everyone you know and love? Wouldn't that be awesome?
I think you kind of covered that a couple weeks ago with the Bell Witch.
Yeah, well, she was omnipresent.
So that's what I got this week. It's just a weird guy with a weird hobby, but he seemed very likable, and he got away with all sorts. Well, no, he didn't get away with all sorts of shit.
He never got away with it.
The golf ones he did. Sort of. I mean, after the fact, like by the time he finished that last hole, everybody knew that he shouldn't be there in any way, shape, or form, but they let him do it.
I'm going to let the people in on a little course secret from somebody who did a fair share of golfing in his day. Everybody's drunk by like hole 10. So they did not give a fuck.
Yeah. That's a good point. I wonder if he was still around and doing this today, if it would go better or worse, because on the one hand, security measures and stuff are taken way more seriously now than they were, obviously, in the 80s and 90s, where it's like, you have a baseball shirt on, you must be a player. Have fun out there. Oh, shit, we got that one wrong.
Whoops.
But on the flip side, he liked doing the golf ones, the jumping into golf games the best, and the game of golf has changed so much, because you're right, like now it's all like people being drunk and loud and stupid, and I think he could probably get away with it. Like totally. Completely get away with it, play it and go home.
How many fucking people are paying attention to like the goddamn bottom tier people in any given tournament?
Right,
like they focus on like the top fucking 5 at any given point, as long as you don't play too well.
Yeah, you don't show up and you're like, I'm Tiger Woods. Like, but you're 80 and white. Like, right. Yes. TV makes me look different.
I said Tiger Woodson.
His cousin. That's how names work.
That's how cousins work.
So the only other person I could think of, and it was about the same time, was like the Kissing Bandit, which you're probably familiar with. I know you're a baseball fan. She did similar. Hers was just running onto the field during a baseball game and like kissing a player or a ref or whatever and running off.
I'd be more terrified of that, honestly.
Oh yeah,
Like,
and
that's like, you know, I'd be worried she's trying to like fucking infect people. Like,
well, that's the thing. Be like, I saw you run onto the field and kiss that third baseman for the Red Sox last week, and I know he's got herpes. Stay away from me.
And wait, why do you know he has? And because I saw him get him. Yeah, like, why are you so sure?
I was at the party, but I didn't want to mention
I was
that.
at the party and I didn't want to make a scene, but damn it, I watched it all.
So that's Barry Bremen, but
Yeah, that's
nobody
that's good
murdered.
shit. Yeah. Yeah, nobody died at the end except fucking cancer.
Yeah, he died tragically early. 64 is young, but at least it wasn't like, oh, he died at 13 of cancer.
It is.
And then a war
It is
broke
sad and terrible, but also not an uncommon cancer age for sure.
Right.
Um,
And also, at the time of his death, you know, it was short, but he got to participate in more All-Star games than anybody else.
if it's any consolation for the people out there who like Barry, he's probably in heaven, probably under a different identity, but he's probably up there.
God's up there talking to Jesus again, then all of a sudden he looks over and goes, "Damn it, Barry, you got me again.
You douchebag. Give him his beard back." Yeah, so, that was good. I think that's a good episode. I think we can leave now.
I hope so. I want some pizza.
Yeah,
That's the real secret to the show is the whole time we're doing this, both of us are just thinking about the food we get to eat afterwards.
And yeah, and what a terrible idea this was because it keeps dinner from us. Yeah, we'll be back next week with more.
With more, yeah.
More stuff. Bye.
Like it or not.
Get stuff.